It's time for Recipe of the Day. I say this often because it is so true. I love making a big pot of soup on Monday or sometimes even Sunday night so that I have wonderful leftover soup in my fridge for lunches. These days, my kids don't take a lunch to school anymore. They like to get it at school. That is up to them at this point. But back in the day, I used to put it in thermoses for them in their lunch boxes. And I know that I can just stop my day and quickly put some soup in a bowl and heat it up. And I'm good to go because I work from home. So that is why I love to have soup on a Monday like today. Today's soup is a stuffed cabbage soup. So this is all the flavors of like Ukrainian cabbage rolls, and it's just easier because it's in soup form. So as you know, I worked a lot in my parents' Ukrainian restaurants when I was growing up, and I am a bit of a cabbage roll making expert, but even for me, they are time consuming to make. And so when I just want those flavors without all the work, I make this soup. So you're going to start by melting 2 tablespoons of butter in a large pot over medium heat. Once it's melted, you are adding a chopped onion. You can also add 2 carrots that you've peeled and chopped. And I say that because the cabbage rolls that I can buy at Publix, I don't buy them because I don't like them, but you could buy them at my Publix, my grocery store. The reason I don't like them is they have shredded carrots in them and I find them a little bit sweet. We don't put carrots in our cabbage rolls, but no judgment. If you like carrots in your cabbage rolls, you can add those peeled and chopped carrots to the pot right now. Or if you just want extra vegetable in your soup, you can go ahead and add them. You could also put some celery in there as well, like 2 ribs of celery. That would be great. Chop that up, add that in as well. Now you're going to cook that just until the onion is softened. You don't need the carrot and or celery to soften. That'll cook in the soup as we go. We're just softening the onion, and then add 2 cloves of minced garlic and stir and cook those there for about 30 seconds. Then to that, you're adding a pound of lean ground beef. You could instead use ground chicken or ground turkey. Even ground pork would work here. Any kind of ground meat, 1 pound, as well as a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of paprika, and half a teaspoon of black pepper. I will just say we don't actually put paprika in our cabbage rolls, and I'm going to be talking about dill in a moment. We don't put dill in our cabbage rolls either, but there's just something about it being soup instead of cabbage rolls where I do want to add just a little bit more seasoning to kind of round out the flavors a little bit. So then after you add those items, you will increase the heat to medium high and give it all a stir, and then cook it undisturbed for 3 or 4 minutes to allow the beef to start browning underneath. Then give it a good stir and then let it kind of cook, stirring occasionally until the beef is no longer pink. It's just going to take a few minutes. At that point, you are stirring in a 1/4 cup of tomato paste and give that a good stir to mix it right through the beef. And then you're also adding 4 cups of beef stock and a 14-ounce can of diced tomatoes. Now, I will say that I've seen a lot of other recipes for stuffed cabbage soup that don't have the tomato paste and the diced tomatoes, and they instead use tomato sauce. So like 1 jar of tomato sauce. You can do that. The reason that I don't is because the tomato sauce that I buy is Marty's favorite tomato sauce. It is the Socceroonie sauce from Newman's Own. He loves that tomato sauce. That is the kind of tomato sauce that I buy and have on hand. And it has just too much like spaghetti Italian kind of flavors to have in this soup to me. And I don't want to just buy special tomato sauce for this. I always have tomato paste and diced tomatoes. And so that is why I go with that. But you can totally use whatever tomato sauce you like. I just wouldn't go with something quite as Italian as the one that I usually buy. Okay, at that point, you are also adding in the cabbage. So the recipe calls for half of a head of green cabbage that you've cored and coarsely chopped. Now, that is going to be equivalent to 6 to 7 cups of chopped cabbage. More or less isn't really going to make a huge difference, but that is the amount that you're aiming for. Or you can use a 14 to 16 ounce bag of shredded cabbage. It is sometimes labeled coleslaw mix, sometimes shredded cabbage. You just want to give it a rough chop because that is really like shredded. They are long strands. And I just find that when you have those shreds in a soup and you like scoop your soup spoon to get some, it's all falling off the spoon because it's longer than your spoon holds. You know what I mean? So give that a rough chop. Oh, you can alternatively use Napa cabbage or red cabbage, half of a medium-sized head of either of those. Again, the goal is 6 to 7 cups of chopped cabbage. So you have added in, let's summarize, the tomato paste you stirred into the ground beef mixture. Then you added 4 cups of beef stock, a can of diced tomatoes, and half of a head of green cabbage that you've coarsely chopped. And then you also add in at this time half a cup of uncooked long grain rice. Now, this recipe has been developed to have that amount of rice cook in the soup in about, 50 to 20 minutes. We're going to do the simmering in a moment. Now, if you want to use a different kind of rice, you're just going to have to adjust the amount of liquid and the cooking time. Like brown rice takes way longer to cook, so it's not going to be ready in this time. Actually, really, my recommendation is to go with the uncooked plain white long grain rice that's called for in this recipe. If you instead wanted to use a different kind of rice, I would suggest that you cook that separately, following the package directions so that you know it's tender. And then you'll just stir that in and then skip some of the simmering. You really just need to heat the rice through because it's already cooked and let all those flavors blend and make sure that the cabbage has gotten tender. You see what I mean? So that was a half cup of uncooked long grain white rice, or if you're using cooked rice, it's a cup to 1.5 cups of cooked rice. And you will also stir in a 1/4 cup of chopped fresh dill and a bay leaf. Then increase the heat to high, bring it up to a boil, stirring occasionally, then drop it down to a simmer and allow it to simmer, stirring every now and then until that rice is tender, about 20 minutes. At that point, you're going to stir in another 1/4 cup of fresh dill. And, I like to add dill in 2 stages like this when I am making soups. You know that I do this in my borscht recipe as well. And that's because the first addition really kind of flavors the whole soup and lets that dill flavor spread out everywhere. And then the last bit that you're adding right at the end, that's your fresh punch, so that it really adds that fresh dill flavor. It's a little bit like I think about when recipes call for lemon juice. They often call for it at the end because it doesn't cook away in the same way. I think it's kind of similar to that. Now, if you wanted to use dried dill instead, you will not add any at the end because dried dill really needs time to hydrate in the liquid and it doesn't work well as a garnish. So if you're using dried dill, you'll add 2 teaspoons of that dried dill weed when you would add that first batch of dill that was going in when all the rice and cabbage and everything was going in there. So you would add your 2 teaspoons of dried dill at that point, and then you don't add any more later. Okay, at this point, you've added that last bit of dill, give it a stir, give it a taste, add more salt and pepper if desired, and then ladle it into bowls, and I like to top each serving with some sour cream, just a little scoop of sour cream, and that's because I love sour cream on my cabbage rolls. We often have cabbage rolls and pierogies as part of the same meal, and I put sour cream on my pierogies, and when some of it ends up on my cabbage rolls, I'm like, oh god, that's good. I need to go get some more sour cream just for the cabbage rolls, so it goes on this soup as well because of that. I will put the link to this recipe in the show notes for this podcast episode, or you can head to cookthestory.com/ROTD and get it there, or find it in our Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/recipeotd. And hey, just a quick note. I'm on a recording hiatus right now, so for the next little while, I'm replaying episodes from the archives, including this one. If you heard me mention a holiday, a season, or something going on in my life that seemed a bit off, that's why. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope you're enjoying these older episodes. I am Christine Pittman from cookthestory.com, thecookful.com, cookfor2.us, and from this podcast, Recipe of the Day. I hope you have a great day. Let's get cooking.